Richard Puros. I'm on 58 and 46 Tannery Road. And my question is, I see the township keep diminishing the capacity for buildings and for square footage. In particular, a piece of property I bought, when I bought it 15 years ago, was 54,000 square foot. When I actually had the wherewithal to develop that property and looked into it, went down to 26,000 square foot. And my plan was to put a warehouse there at some point in my career and then use that as sort of a retirement. And I made a mistake in not keeping in touch with the township and doing some due diligence. And so now I got a hold of this and I said, well, gee, now it's no warehouse at all. So I'm a little bit, I don't know why. It seems like this was brought up on December 5th and it's, pardon me, November at the last meeting, and it's being voted on at this meeting. I don't see a lot of people that I know would be concerned about this, and I would ask that maybe kick the can down the road a little bit and possibly give some other people like myself a chance to voice their opinion. And the other thing I just heard the lady say, encouraging clean operations, but not having outside storage, not having warehouses. You know, there are a lot of people in the township that have operations that are contractors and business people. I will concur, some of which I can attest to that aren't clean. That goes beyond what I'm here for. I just take care of my own business and make sure I stay clean. So I would just ask that, you know, when the town just sees that all of a sudden across for something, it alarms me because then again, to me, it's like, that's a no, or that could be also some financial constraints to go in front of the board, because then obviously you go to the planner, and then he's got to take a look at it, and whether it's 1, 2, or 3 reviews, I mean, some people don't have unlimited, I mean, nobody has unlimited funds.
This is proposing to take away a couple of uses, but the other half is saying, you know, for the maximum floor area ratio was 4.25% of the property. If people are going to keep things inside their buildings, then we're going to let it go to 25% of the property. That's a larger use. If right now for maximum impervious coverage is at, I believe, 17.5%, we're saying to keep things inside of the building, half the property, 50%. So at the same time, this proposal is encouraging other types of larger structures in many ways to be have other uses.
Yeah, I understand it, but like, you know, in some ways there are things that people store outside that doesn't make good financial sense to put buildings over top of.
Right.
If you follow me.
Bit of a complicated story, but in general, the main reasons for this population increase have been the extermination of their natural predators, which began in the 1800s, combined with warming winters, which often aren't cold enough to kill deer in large numbers anymore. And the single greatest factor has been suburban development, which has fragmented our forests and provided ample food resources in our yards and landscaping and farms to feed the deer, plus abundant cover for them to hide during the daytime, and then refuges from hunters, because it's difficult to hunt in suburban environments. And so the result of that combination of factors is really responsible for this range-wide phenomenon that we've been seeing throughout the Northeast and in much of the Midwest as well. At the local level, scientists estimate that deer populations historically were about 10 per square mile. And there's a lot of different sources of evidence for that. But the main reason we know that that's the case is that when deer populations exceed 10 per square mile, you start to see the preferred browse species disappearing from the landscapes. And most of our forest birds are insectivores, at least primarily depending upon insects for their diet, and you can see the bird populations declining as well. So you can see one thing leading to another, and really catastrophic widespread effects from this phenomenon of deer eating everything that they can access in the forest understories. And it doesn't end there, it affects us as well. So public safety concerns, for example, are extraordinary. Across the country, there's more than 200 deaths per year from deer vehicle collisions. In New Jersey, there's been 10 deaths in the past 10 years that have been documented. And in New Jersey alone, this translates into over $110 million worth of vehicle damage a year. This is from State Farm Insurance, based on their statistics, which is one of the groups that's been keeping the closest track of this phenomenon. And for individual counties in the central portions of the state where most of the collisions are occurring and the populations are the highest, That translates into $10 to $13 million per county, and at the township level, it's between $400,000 and $1.5 million worth of damage. And again, that's just the vehicles. That has nothing to do with personal injury, pain and suffering, and other costs incurred from these collisions. I've been living in Readington, I think 12 years, and I've been here 3 times at least, and I'm not part of these statistics because it didn't meet my deductible. So there's many more collisions that are happening beyond this, scaring the pants out of many of us as we drive through town. There's also public health concerns. Deer aren't the main reservoir of Lyme disease that the deer ticks are picking up. The ticks in their early life stages pick up the Lyme disease, typically from rodents, birds, and reptiles in the forest. But as the ticks grow up into their later stages of life, they mostly attach to deer as their primary vector, and they move throughout the landscape on the backs of deer, where they find their way into our yards and our landscapes, and that puts us at risk as well. And so we have some of the highest incidences of Lyme disease in Hunterdon and Morris County, New Jersey, which themselves are in the top rankings throughout the region. So we also studied the effectiveness of different hunting programs that occur in the region, as well as their costs. So in Readington, we have recreational hunting, where our open space properties are leased out to different hunting clubs. That actually brings in revenue to the town, so it doesn't cost us anything. The problem with this and other types of recreational systems is that they tend not to work very well in terms of forest health or other types of concerns that we talked about. One of the most effective ones is bringing in professional sharpshooters. That's very expensive. It costs $200 to $300 per deer. It will drop your deer population to whatever you want to overnight, but it tends to be politically problematic because the public's not very happy with that high degree of take in the population, and it's really expensive. So Princeton, for example, pays approximately $100,000 a year to continue this program. So that's not really sustainable for most townships. Many towns and park systems are moving to what they are referring to as management hunting or ecological deer management, where they're working with hunters that are more interested in managing for ecological reasons, to bring the deer population down, not just to get a trophy buck or have a single deer for their fridge for meat for the season. It's really about bringing down the populations of deer so that the rest of the life of the forest can return. And with skilled hunters working from that mindset, which is a lot of work, but it's possible, it turns out to be very effective and typically is much lower in costs, usually to subsidize the cost of feed, transportation, and or butchering to the donation programs with like Hunters Helping the Hungry. Many people are also interested in contraceptives. Unfortunately, they're even more expensive, and none of the ones that are currently available, to my understanding, have any proven effectiveness. They tend to only work when you have controlled deer populations where each one is tagged, typically in an exclosure, so you can keep track of which ones you've inoculated with the contraceptives, because they have to be continually injected either on an annual basis or every couple of years. So in an open environment where you can't keep track of every individual deer, it's not really feasible to employ these types of contraceptives, at least until new ones develop. And then the most expensive is trap and release. Duke Farms actually attempted that when they first started managing the property for environmental concerns. They trapped all the deer out and sent them to a farm somewhere, and that costs about $1,500 per year and doesn't work.
I think the struggle that we've had is a legal one to some degree, which is when you have public land, you're required to use a public bidding process. And there's good reason for that legally, right? So that people don't favor their friends or their relatives or whatever. That's why we have this whole local public bidding process. And that's why I think we've been given the advice in years past that that's how we have to do this process, the bidding process for the hunt clubs. So what we've tried to do is write into the leases things like you have to take a certain number of does before you can take a buck. Things like you have to report to us at the end of the year how many you took, or else you can't bid next year. We try to write as many of those things in as possible, but we haven't yet figured out a way to do this without running afoul of the...
Well, what you have to do, it's a different program when you start now hiring professional deer, sharpshooters. That's a different program.
I also chair the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm here because of the letter we received from Hunterdon County for the reconstruction of the bridge on the road over the Rockaway Creek. Okay, this is a one-lane bridge which the county is proposing to make it into. It's a one-lane 15-ton bridge which the county is proposing to make into a 2-lane 40-ton bridge. I'll stop right there. This bridge is a contributing element within the historic district of the White House Mechanicsville Historic District, listed on the State of New Jersey State of New Jersey Register of Historic Places and on the National Register of Historic Places. What that means is the county, the town, or the state cannot proceed with this until they go through the Historic Preservation Office. They are required, I checked with the State Historic Preservation Office just to make sure that all our ducks are in a row, and the bridge is listed on the State Historic Register, which means that the county must fill out an application for project authorization under the New Jersey Register of Historic Preservation Act.